Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, October 7th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Illinois game in 4 days, the game against Michigan in 53 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at GratefulGriddleOH.com. Today's show, going to be touching on something that I kind of mentioned on yesterday's show, but wanted to go into a little more detail about. And that is the news that two guys who were sort of projected as at least contributors and maybe even potential starters during the summer are now going to apparently be redshirting. That's according to a report from Stephen Means of Cleveland.com. I'm joined by Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, CJ Hicks and Malik Hartford both apparently going to be redshirting now. Now, that does not mean they're transferring. That does not mean that we have seen the last of them in scarlet and gray, but still kind of an interesting move for both of those guys.
It is, and I was on with Juck on Buckeye Huddle Primetime last Monday, and I made mention of the fact that we're now to the 4-game point of the season, so there could be some movement in terms of players choosing to redshirt or opt out or whatever, and not thinking too much of it, just the fact that the calendar had reached that point. But seeing these two names, it's interesting in that I can understand it for both guys. It's also interesting in that well, let me ask you, Tom, which one of these are more, do you think the coaches are more okay with?
I would say just based on the fact that, well, that's an interesting question because there's two different ways to look at it. One is that Malik Hartford only played in 2 games. So in terms of direct impact on this year's team, probably that's a little bit less of an impact. CJ Hicks had played in the first 4 games to varying degrees. He had 19 snaps against Texas and then 5 against Washington. But you also, in both cases, are potentially, if CJ Hicks comes back for next year and plays as a Buckeye, there are going to be spots where they are going to have to, there are going to be snaps they have to fill at the defensive end position. And then you figure Caleb Downs leaves, so you're going to need to fill spots at the safety position. So, I can see arguments for both of these guys in terms of, here's why, yes, I understand why this makes sense for the players, but you also can kind of see why it makes sense for the team.
Yeah, and I think, yes, if both guys come back, the team is happy with that. I do think that it makes them thinner in the secondary than it does at defensive end. So I think that creates an issue where now are you relying on a freshman like Fahim Delane or a redshirt freshman like Leroy Roker to step in for Malik Hartford, where this guy is a junior who has experience, understands what you're trying to do. So there's that aspect of it. Or does this now, is this something that Lorenzo Styles, if needed, could do, and they can move some pieces around? We know that. So I just think the experience that he brings at that position at safety makes this a bigger loss there. If they can get CJ Hicks to spend a year at defensive end and then come back and play defensive end, fantastic. I don't know if we want to get into speculating, but at this point, he's been a defensive end for a little bit, has played a little bit, not enough of a sample size to say this guy needs to come back next year or this guy's definitely coming back next year. But he is an interesting prospect, and in this day and age, it's like, what does an interesting prospect command on the open market, and would Ohio State be interested in matching that open market?
Yeah, and that's a whole separate conversation because, what does he have in terms of film that another team would be looking at and saying, oh, yeah, this is someone who you're going to bring in and guarantee a starting spot to or anything like that. I don't know. One of the other interesting pieces of the Malik Hartford thing is he's only played in 2 games. So theoretically, if they needed him, if someone got seriously hurt and you needed him to fill in and take more snaps, he's got 2 more games where he could then still potentially redshirt if you needed him to step in that role. One other piece of this that I think, we talked about, this does not mean that you have seen the last of either of these guys in an Ohio State uniform, is the 4-game redshirt rule. That's just the regular season. So you could theoretically see both of these guys play 5 more games. You could theoretically see Malik Hartford play 7 more games, 2 more regular season, and then a Big Ten championship game, and then potentially up to 4 college football playoff games. So, these are both guys who I would expect you will continue to see around the program, certainly. And, this is, I'm sure, and people will hear this and think they're opting out. And no, that's not at all what this necessarily means.
Right. Although we'll see if there's an opportunity for Malik Hartford to get a couple more regular season games. There's no reason for him not to play in those. Maybe you'd save them for like Michigan, and then, whatever is the next most important, biggest game before Michigan, and then Michigan if needed. We saw Jonathan Cooper do that before. The example that I like to use is the fact that both Aaron Scott and Bryce West played 7 games last year, but Bryce West redshirted because 4 of his games came in the postseason, and 4 or 5 of Aaron Scott's games came in the regular season. So you can still get plenty of work in from these guys, and enough to help them out, to help the Buckeyes out and be part of this. It'll just be interesting to see what happens the rest of the regular season with Malik Hartford.
Yeah, that's definitely something where you can have the, what they say, what are they going to do? You watch what they do, not listen to what they say, kind of thing. That will be sort of instructive, I think, in terms of, do you see him again for another couple of games or not? Now the next question is, okay, who does this mean more playing time for? I think we kind of got a hint for the on the defensive line side of things, where Kenyatta Jackson went down with an injury, and all of a sudden you saw a bunch more Zion Grady on Saturday night.
Yeah, Zion Grady with 10 snaps, and he's a guy that has, you don't see him much, but he's kind of flashed when he's been out there. This is a really good opportunity for him. He's played 3 games at this point, so it doesn't sound like they're interested in redshirting him. Another guy to watch would be Epi Satanale, who has also played 3 games. So they each have 1 more regular season game that they can play. We've seen Logan George start to come back a little bit. He's played in a couple games, did not play against Washington. So right now they're still picking and choosing when to play him, which gives you an idea of he's still a little bit behind the others. But yeah, I'm with you. Zion Grady. We'll see if Joshua Mickens can get in there more as well. I think Grady has the higher upside for sure, as he's just a true freshman and he's already getting couple more snaps than Mickens at this point. And then, at some point, will we see one of the young linebackers doing the Arvell Reese thing as he's playing on the edge and taking some of those snaps as well when they're in that 5-man alignment?
Yeah, that they're doing some really creative stuff up front on defense. That's going to be something I'm going to be talking to Ross Fulton about a little later on in the week when we do the review of the Ohio State defense against Minnesota. Going to talk to Ross about the Ohio State offense against Minnesota as well. They took our advice and got away from some of the 13 and 14 personnel down in the goal line, and it worked out just fine for them. So we'll talk to Ross about that later on in the week. We'll talk to Ross about the defense and some of the changes there as well. And then we'll get in the car. Not Ross, you and I, though. Get in the car, head to lovely Champaign, Illinois. The forecast for Saturday, sunny, 75 and 5-mile-an-hour winds. Really not getting the full Champaign experience there, but that's okay. You won't hear either of us complaining, either here or at BuckeyeHuddle.com, because that's where Tony and I are talking to all of our members on the Huddle Board, presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus, answering your questions, talking about the Buckeyes. Got our whole team covering the Buckeyes, covering recruiting, covering X's and O's, and all that and more, plus that really fun and active community on the Huddle Board. That is all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Also, make sure you check us out at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle if you're listening on your podcast platform of choice. That's a great place to get even more information and even more insight into the Buckeyes. We'll have our live stream of Ryan Day's press conference coming up noon on Tuesday, and then interviews again Wednesday evening, and then all sorts of coverage for you coming up this weekend from Champaign. All the corn you can possibly imagine, maybe some football too. All at BuckeyeHuddle.com and YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.